There is a rotting corpse on a golden chair, and 10 trillion humans pray to it every single day. They call him the God Emperor of mankind, the Master of humanity, the Light of terror, the Carrion Lord of the Imperium. They believe he is perfect. They believe he is all-knowing. They believe he sacrificed himself willingly to save every last one of them. And most of that is a lie. Not a small one, not a harmless misunderstanding passed down through 10,000 years of broken telephone and distorted record-keeping. A deliberate, calculated, monstrous deception built into the very foundation of the Imperium itself, stamped into every prayer book, carved into every cathedral wall, beaten into the skull of every child born on every one of a million worlds. Because the Emperor of mankind, for all his unimaginable power, for all his millennia of planning and scheming and conquering, for all his terrifying brilliance and ruthless vision, was never the flawless golden deity that the Ecclesiarchy wants you to believe. He was something far more complicated than that, far more dangerous than that, and far more terrible than the sanitized version of history that the Imperial Creed has turned him into. He was a liar, he was a manipulator, he was a tyrant who wore the mask of a liberator. And if you knew what he actually did, what he actually planned, what he was actually willing to sacrifice to get what he wanted, you would understand why half his sons turned against him. You would understand why the galaxy burns. You would understand why 10,000 years later, nothing has gotten better. It has only gotten worse. Every single day, it gets worse. So pull up a chair. Check that your Vox channels are secure. Make sure no inquisitors are listening. Bolt the door and burn any copies of the Lectitio Divinitatus you have lying around, because what you are about to hear would make even the most fanatical confessor scream heresy. Today we are going to talk about the 10 things the Emperor of mankind does not want you to know, and every single one of them could get you killed. Number 1. He made warp pacts with the Chaos Gods to create the Primarchs. Let us start with the big one. The one that would shatter the faith of every man, woman, and child across the Imperium if they ever found out. The one that would break the Ecclesiarchy, topple the Imperial Creed, and send the entire theocratic edifice of the Imperium crashing down in flames. The Emperor made a deal with the dark gods of chaos. Yes, those chaos gods. The same 4 monstrous entities that the Imperium has spent 10,000 years fighting. The same 4 abominations that corrupted Horus Lupercal and tore the galaxy in half during the most devastating civil war in human history. The same 4 nightmares that every single citizen of the Imperium is taught to fear and despise above all other threats in existence. Khorne, the blood god; Tseyench, the architect of fate; Nurgle, the plague father; and whatever other horrors lurked in the deep warp before Slaanesh was born. The Emperor went to them, willingly, and he bargained for power. Here is how it happened. Long before the Unification Wars, long before the Great Crusade, long before the Imperium was even a dream in the minds of mortal men, the being who would become the Emperor of mankind traveled to a world called Molech. This was during the dark age of technology, when humanity was still a powerful interstellar civilization spread across the stars, and the Emperor was still walking among mortals in secret, guiding them from the shadows under 100 different names and 1,000 different faces. On Molech, there was a gateway. Not just any gateway, not a webway portal or a navigational buoy or any of the mundane technology that humanity used for warp travel in those days. This was a gate directly into the Imperium itself, a door that opened straight into the domain of the Chaos Gods. The Emperor did not stumble upon this gate by accident. He went looking for it. He knew it was there. He traveled to Molech with a group of fellow perpetuals, immortal beings like himself, who had walked the earth for millennia. Among them was Olivia Shureka, a woman who had been alive almost as long as the Emperor himself, and who would be left behind on Molech to guard the gate after the Emperor was finished with it. They arrived on a one-way void craft. The Emperor entered the gate alone. What happened inside is one of the greatest and most closely guarded mysteries in all of the lore. No one knows exactly what was said. No one knows the precise terms of the agreement. The accounts we have come primarily from demonic sources, which are inherently unreliable, and from fragments of conversation between the Emperor and his sons that were never meant to be overheard. What we do know, from multiple sources across the Horus Heresy novel series and the wider lore, is that the Emperor walked into that gate as an already impossibly powerful being, and he walked out with something new, something he did not have before. Specifically, he walked out with the knowledge required to create the Primarchs, not just genetically engineer them, not just clone them or grow them in vats. He had already mastered genetic manipulation. He had already created the Thunder Warriors, those crude but devastatingly effective super soldiers who would later conquer Terra for him. No, what the Emperor gained on Molech was something beyond genetics. It was the knowledge of how to infuse living beings with the raw power of the warp itself, how to take genetic material and bind it with immaterial energy so that the resulting creations would be more than human, more than post-human, more than anything that had ever walked the galaxy before. This is why the Primarchs were not simply large, strong, intelligent people. They were demigods, in the truest and most literal sense of the word. Each one of them carried a sliver of warp energy within their being, a fragment of something that went beyond the physical and into the metaphysical. Each one of them had a kind of soul that transcended anything a normal human could possess. Magnus the Red could rival the Emperor himself in psychic might. His mind could reach across the galaxy and touch the thoughts of other beings light years away. Sanguinius could see the future with such clarity that he knew the exact manner of his own death years before it happened. Lorgar could inspire religious devotion in entire planetary civilizations with a single speech, his words carrying a weight that went beyond mere charisma and into something that could only be described as supernatural. Layman Russ was so psychically fortified that the madness of the warp itself could not touch his mind. Vulcan was functionally immortal, even by Primarch standards, able to regenerate from any wound, even death itself. Conrad Curzay saw visions of darkness and despair that would have broken the mind of any lesser being. These were not simple genetic traits that could be reproduced in a laboratory. These were gifts that came from somewhere else. Powers that had their origin not in the material world of DNA and protein, but in the roiling, screaming depths of the Imperium. And the Emperor cheated on his deal. Whatever he promised the Chaos Gods in exchange for this knowledge, he did not deliver. He took what they gave him, used it to create his 20 superhuman sons, and then turned his back on the bargain. He had no intention of ever honoring his word. He was, after all, the anathema, the one being in the entire galaxy that the forces of chaos feared above all others, the embodiment of everything they despised: order, control, reason, structure, the very concept of existence without chaos. And the Chaos Gods were not pleased. They were not surprised, perhaps. Beings that ancient, that cunning, that deeply embedded in the fabric of the warp, do not get fooled easily. But they were enraged. And they took their revenge almost immediately. Using manipulation that defied the normal rules of time and space, the Dark Gods managed to get past the protective barriers around the Primarchs while they were still gestating in their incubation pods beneath the Himalayan mountains. Some sources say it was the word-bearer Argel Tau, sent back in time by the demon Ingethel the Ascended, who physically disabled the Geller field generators, protecting the gene laboratory. The first heretic novel describes this scene in vivid and terrible detail. The word-bearers watching helplessly as their time-traveling selves destroy the shields that keep the infant Primarch safe. Other sources say it was the perpetual Urda, one of the Emperor's closest companions and effectively the genetic mother of the Primarchs, who opened the warp vortex that scattered them. Urda was horrified by what the Emperor planned for her children. She saw them not as tools of conquest, but as her sons, and she could not bear to watch them be used the way the Emperor intended. According to the Daemon Erebus, Urda was herself unwittingly manipulated by the Chaos Gods into committing this act. Perhaps it was both. Perhaps it was neither. Perhaps all of these contradictory accounts are simultaneously true in the way that only things touched by the warp can be. What matters is the result. A massive, localized warp rift tore open within the gene vaults of the Imperial Palace. The 20 gestation capsules containing the Emperor's unborn sons were ripped free from their mountings and sucked into the screaming madness of the Immaterium. They tumbled through the warp for years, decades, perhaps even centuries by some measurements of time, before finally coming to rest on human-inhabited worlds scattered across the entire galaxy. 20 infant demigods, each one carrying a sliver of stolen warp energy, each one touched by the Chaos Gods before they had even drawn their first breath. And this, right here, is the first great secret, the foundation upon which every other lie was built. The Emperor of mankind used the power of his greatest enemies to build his greatest weapons. He made a deal with the devil, broke that deal, and spent the rest of history paying the price for his arrogance. Every single catastrophe that followed, the scattering of the Primarchs, the corruption of the legions, the Horus heresy, the deaths of billions upon billions of people, the 10,000 years of suffering and decay that have defined the Imperium ever since. It all traces back to that moment on Molech, when the Emperor decided that the ends justified the means, that he was clever enough, powerful enough, special enough to outsmart the Chaos Gods themselves. He was wrong, and the Chaos Gods have never, ever forgotten. Number 2. The Imperial truth was a deliberate lie. He knew the gods were real and enforced atheism to starve them. During the Great Crusade, as the legions of space marines swept outward across the galaxy, conquering world after world in the name of the Emperor, they brought with them not just guns and warships, but an ideology. It was called the Imperial truth, and it was simple, absolute, and non-negotiable. There are no gods, there are no supernatural forces, there are no spirits, no daemons, no divine beings of any kind anywhere in the universe. Everything that exists can be explained through science and reason. The universe is rational. Religion is superstition left over from darker, more ignorant ages of human history. It has no place in the enlightened Imperium of man. This was not presented as a theory or a philosophy or one possible interpretation of reality among many. It was presented as fact, absolute, unquestionable, unchallengeable fact, and it was enforced with devastating thoroughness. The Emperor's Thunder Warriors had already destroyed every church, temple, mosque, synagogue and shrine on Terra during the Unification Wars, believing it to be necessary to have humanity accept science and reason over superstition and barbarism. His iterators, specially trained orators and propagandists who accompanied every expeditionary fleet, spread the Imperial truth to every new world the Crusade reached. Old faiths were torn down, religious texts were burned, temples were demolished or converted into secular administrative buildings. Those who refused to abandon their beliefs were re-educated. Those who still refused after re-education were dealt with more harshly. The Emperor presented himself as the pinnacle of human achievement, not as a god, never as a god, but as proof that gods were unnecessary. Look at what humanity can accomplish on its own, he seemed to say. Look at what science and reason and the will of man can build. Who needs gods when you have this? And it was all a carefully constructed deception from start to finish. The Emperor knew perfectly well that the warp was alive with malign intelligence. He had personally traveled into the domain of the Chaos Gods on Molech. He had bargained with them face to face, standing before entities of such terrifying scope and power that they could reshape reality with a thought. He understood better than any living being in the galaxy that the warp contained sentient forces of almost limitless destructive capability, forces that fed on the emotions, beliefs, and worship of mortal creatures. He was not ignorant. He was not mistaken. He was not operating on incomplete information. He knew the truth, and he lied about it, deliberately, systematically, to every single human being alive. The reasoning behind the lie was cold and calculating in the extreme. The Emperor understood that the Chaos Gods drew their strength from worship, from emotion, from belief, from the psychic energy generated by billions of mortal minds turning their thoughts toward the divine. Every prayer offered to any deity, even one that was not specifically a Chaos God, generated energy in the warp. Every act of religious devotion, every ritual, every moment of fervent belief contributed to the power of the entities that dwelled in the Imperium. Faith was fuel, worship was food, and the Chaos Gods had been gorging themselves on it for millennia. So the Emperor decided that the best way to fight gods was to pretend they did not exist, If humanity could be convinced that there was nothing in the warp worth worrying about, if religion could be stamped out entirely across the species, then the Chaos Gods would be starved of the psychic fuel they needed to threaten humanity. It was a strategy of deliberate ignorance, a plan built on keeping the entire human race, trillions upon trillions of people, in the dark about the most dangerous threat they had ever faced. And it failed. Catastrophically. Totally. Irrevocably. Because you cannot protect people from a threat by refusing to tell them the threat exists. The warriors of the Great Crusade encountered warp phenomena constantly. They found worlds ruled by sorcerers who wielded powers that could not be explained by any known science. They fought creatures that phased in and out of reality, that laughed at bolter rounds, that could not be killed by any conventional weapon. They watched entire civilizations fall to madness and mutation that seemed to come from nowhere. They witnessed things that the Imperial truth said were flatly impossible. And when they asked for answers, they were told to stop asking questions. When they demanded to know what was happening, they were told that it was simply unknown Xenos technology or unexplained natural phenomena. Nothing to worry about, nothing supernatural. Move along. When Lorgar Aurelian of the Word-Bearers tried to tell his father that faith was important, that humanity needed something to believe in, that the Emperor himself was worthy of worship because of his obvious divinity, the Emperor did not sit down with his son and explain the complex reasons why religion was dangerous. He did not trust Lorgar with the truth about the warp and the Chaos Gods and the careful strategy of psychic starvation he was attempting. Instead, he humiliated him. He ordered the Ultramarines, not even Lorgar's own legion, to travel to the Word-Bearer's crown jewel, the perfect city of Monarchia, the most beautiful cathedral city in the Imperium, which Lorgar had spent decades building as a monument to the Emperor's glory, and he had it razed to the ground, every building leveled, every shrine shattered, every piece of art and devotional work destroyed. Then he forced the entire Word-Bearer's legion to kneel in the ashes of the city their Primarch had built, and publicly berated Lorgar for his failure to follow the Imperial truth. Lorgar was devastated. His spirit was broken in a way that even a Primarch could not easily recover from. And when his old mentors, the priest Corphaeron and the chaplain Erebus, came to him in his despair and whispered that there were real gods out there, gods who would welcome his worship, gods who would not reject him the way the Emperor had, Lorgar listened. He went searching for these gods. He found them near the Eye of Terror, and he willingly gave his soul to Chaos Undivided. From there, he spent decades secretly corrupting his brother Horus and laying the groundwork for the heresy that would tear the Imperium apart. The Horus heresy began in large part because the Imperial truth left humanity completely and utterly unprepared for the reality of chaos. When Horus was wounded on the moon of Davin, and the Chaos Gods showed him visions of the warp, of what his father had been hiding from him, of the true nature of the universe, it broke something fundamental inside the greatest of the Emperor's sons. He felt betrayed. He felt like everything he had fought for, everything he had sacrificed and bled for, was built on a lie, because it was. The Primarch Jagatai Khan of the White Scars, one of the more thoughtful of the Emperor's sons, put it perfectly when he mused that it was the knowledge that the Emperor had concealed his true purpose from his favored son that led to the downfall of Horus. The suspicion took root in the War Master's mind that he was not truly his father's favorite, that others knew more of the truth than he did, that the whole enterprise had been a grand deception from the very beginning. And he was right. It was. The Imperial truth was the foundation of the Imperium, and it was rotten from the very start, built on a lie so vast and so calculated that when it finally crumbled, it took half the galaxy with it. Number 3. He planned to discard the Space Marines after the Great Crusade, just like he butchered the Thunder Warriors. Before there were Space Marines, there were Thunder Warriors. These were the Emperor's first genetically enhanced super soldiers, created in his secret laboratories beneath the Himalayan mountains during the dark final years of the Age of Strife. Their purpose was singular and brutal. Fight the unification wars, conquer every techno-barbarian kingdom, every warlord's domain, every fortified enclave on the surface of Terra, drag humanity's homeworld kicking and screaming out of 5,000 years of anarchy, and unite it under the Emperor's banner. The Thunder Warriors were built for this job, and nothing else. They were enormous, even bigger than the Space Marines who would come after them. They were ferocious in combat, possibly even stronger than an Astartes in a straight fight. They were absolutely loyal to the Emperor, and they served him with savage devotion through decades of the most brutal warfare Terra had ever seen. They carved through the armies of Callaghan of Ursh, the legions of Cardinal Tang, the techno-barbarian hordes of the Pan-Pacific Empire. They broke every enemy the Emperor pointed them at. They won the Unification Wars. And when it was over, when the last enemy had been defeated, and Terra was finally united under one ruler for the first time in millennia, the Emperor had them all killed. The official Imperial history says that the last Thunder Warriors died heroically at the Battle of Mount Ararat, the final battle of the Unification Wars. One of them, a legendary hero named Arik Taranis, supposedly raised the Emperor's banner at the very moment of victory, before falling in glorious combat. A noble end to a noble brotherhood of warriors who gave everything for the dream of a united humanity. Except that is not what happened, not even close. The truth is that the Emperor arranged for the massacre of the Thunder Warriors at Mount Ararat and possibly at several other locations. Hundreds of the Legio Custodes, the Emperor's personal bodyguard, possibly led by the legendary Constantin Valdor himself, along with several thousand of the very earliest Space Marines from the First Legion, turned on the Thunder Warriors the moment the fighting was done and butchered them. Not because the Thunder Warriors had turned traitor, not because they had failed their mission, not because they had done anything wrong at all, but because they were no longer useful. The Thunder Warriors were powerful but unstable. Their genetic modifications were crude and violent, compared to the more refined Space Marine template that the Emperor had been developing in parallel. They aged rapidly. They suffered organ failure. Their minds degraded over time, many becoming prone to fits of insanity and uncontrollable berserker rage. They were built for conquest, not for governance, and the Emperor had already built their replacements. He did not need them anymore, so he threw them away. Arik Taranis, the great hero of Mount Ararat, actually survived the cull. He escaped the massacre and lived in hiding on Terra for over a century, taking the alias Babu Dakal and becoming a criminal warlord in the underhive of Petitioner City. He knew exactly what the Emperor had done. He knew that the man he had fought and bled for had ordered the deaths of every single one of his brothers. And amazingly, heartbreakingly, he bore no grudge. He understood that the Thunder Warriors had always been a means to an end, that they were never meant to see the future they were fighting to create. They were disposable, and they had been disposed of. Now here is the terrifying part. The part that should keep every Space Marine in the galaxy awake at night, if they ever allowed themselves to think about it. There is strong evidence from multiple sources across the Horus Heresy novels and the wider lore that the Emperor intended to do the exact same thing to the Space Marines once the Great Crusade was finished. Think about it carefully. Think about it the way the Emperor would have thought about it, with that cold, calculating 10,000-year-old mind that saw everything in terms of utility and expendability. The Space Marines were created for war. Every aspect of their being was designed for conquest. They were weapons, the finest weapons humanity had ever produced, but weapons nonetheless. The Emperor's ultimate plan was not just to conquer the galaxy. It was to guide humanity through its evolution into a fully psychic species, safe from chaos, connected through the webway, and governed by ordinary human beings. In that future, what purpose would millions of post-human super soldiers serve? They could not be easily reintegrated into civilian society. They could not have families. They could not hold normal jobs. They were too powerful, too dangerous, and too removed from baseline humanity to be anything other than warriors. And in a galaxy at peace, warriors are a liability, not an asset. The Primarch Guilliman was one of the few who seemed to sense this approaching problem, which is why he started planning for his Ultramarines to transition into civilian roles as administrators, peacekeepers, and governors, rather than simply remaining a pure military force. Guilliman was always the planner, the builder, the one who thought about what came after the fighting, but most of the other Primarchs either did not see it coming or chose not to think about it. According to Malcador the Sigillite, The Emperor's closest advisor, and perhaps the only being in the galaxy who truly understood the master of mankind's plans. The Emperor and Malcador had deliberately set the Primarchs against each other. They had agitated them, stoked rivalries, and created conditions that would inevitably lead to internal conflict. The resulting civil war was supposed to purge the legions of their most dangerous and unmanageable elements, leaving behind only those who could be safely controlled or dismantled. Just as the Thunder Warriors had been purged. This account comes with caveats. Malcador himself seemed to keep the truth of it deliberately ambiguous, and it is possible that he was lying or exaggerating or simply trying to make sense of a disaster that had spiraled far beyond anyone's control. But the precedent was already established beyond any reasonable doubt. The Emperor had thrown away the Thunder Warriors the moment they outlived their usefulness. He had done it without hesitation, without remorse, without even the courtesy of a warning. He had lied about it afterward, rewriting history to turn a massacre into a heroic last stand. Why would anyone believe he would not do the same to the Space Marines, the Custodian Guard, the Emperor's personal bodyguard, who were even more powerful than Space Marines in individual combat, seemed almost tailor-made for this role. During the war in the Webway, the Blood Angel's Space Marine Dominion, Zephon watched Custodians fighting traitor Marines and noted that the Custodes seemed almost designed to kill Space Marines. Their fighting style, their war gear, their tactics, everything about them was eerily effective against Astartes, because perhaps they had been built with exactly that contingency in mind. The Emperor was a planner. He thought in centuries. He prepared for every eventuality. And the most obvious eventuality, the one staring everyone in the face, was that the Space Marines would become obsolete the moment the galaxy was at peace. The Primarchs were not his sons. They were his latest set of disposable weapons. And the Horus heresy, for all its horror, may have been in part because some of them figured that out before he was ready for them too. Number 4. The two lost Primarchs. Something so terrible he erased all records and mind-wiped their brothers. There were 20 Primarchs. Everyone in the Imperium knows that, or at least everyone who has access to the oldest records. But by the time the Horus heresy began, there were only 18. 2 of them were gone, not dead in the way that Ferrus Manus was dead, struck down in battle at Istvan V, with his head taken by his brother Fulgrim, not fallen to chaos in the way that Horus or Lorgar or Mortarion fell, corrupted by the dark powers and turned against everything they had once believed in. The Primarchs of the 2nd and 11th Legions are simply gone. Erased, eliminated from the historical record with such thoroughness that it defies belief. Every reference to their existence has been destroyed. Their names have been deleted from every archive in the Imperium, from every cogitator bank, from every data crystal, from every handwritten scroll. Their statues in the Great Hall of the Imperial Palace stand on empty plinths, their features scoured away, their inscriptions obliterated. Their legions have vanished from the military roster as if they never existed. No heraldry, no battle honors, no memorial of any kind, and none of the surviving Primarchs will speak about them. Not the loyalists, not the traitors, not even the ones who have been consumed by chaos and would presumably have no reason to maintain the Emperor's secrets anymore. Whatever happened to the 2nd and 11th, the silence around it is absolute and universal. This is called the Damnatio Memoriae, the condemnation of memory, an edict of obliteration, and it is the most complete and successful erasure of information in the entire 10,000-year history of the Imperium. Think about how staggering that accomplishment is. The Imperium is a sprawling, decaying bureaucracy that stretches across 1 million worlds. Information leaks constantly. Secrets are poorly kept. Records are duplicated and reduplicated across thousands of administrative centers on thousands of planets. The administratum alone employs billions of scribes whose entire existence is devoted to copying and cataloging data. And yet the Emperor managed to completely and totally wipe 2 entire Space Marine legions, each potentially numbering in the hundreds of thousands of warriors, along with their Primarchs, their homeworlds, their cultures, their victories, their defeats, and every single piece of documentation pertaining to their existence from the face of the galaxy. That does not happen by accident. That takes extraordinary effort, extraordinary intention, and an extraordinary reason. We do not know what that reason was. Games Workshop has deliberately kept this mystery unsolved since the very beginning of Warhammer 40,000, and it is possible that they never intend to answer it. But we have fragments, little pieces of information that different sources have let slip over the millennia. In The First Heretic, the novel that tells the story of Lorgar's fall to chaos, the Word-Bearer's Primarch tells Magnus the Red that he fears the Emperor will break the Word-Bearers and break him, that they would be cast alongside the brothers they no longer speak of. This confirms several things. Whatever happened to the 2nd and 11th occurred before the heresy. It was done by the Emperor himself, or at his direct command. And it was used as a threat, a warning to the other Primarchs. Step out of line, and this is what happens to you. In James Swallow's novel Fear to Tread, Sanguinius of the Blood Angels reveals why he has been keeping the Red Thirst, the terrible flaw in his legion's gene seed that turns his warriors into mindless, blood-crazed killers, a secret from the Emperor. He says he will not be responsible for the erasure of the Blood Angels from Imperial history. He will not have a third empty plinth beneath the roof of the Hegemon as his legion's only memorial. This implies very strongly that whatever destroyed the Lost Legions may have been related to a genetic flaw, a mutation, something inherent in the gene seed that could not be controlled or cured. Sanguinius feared that if the Emperor learned about the Red Thirst, he would do to the Blood Angels what he had already done twice before. In the Alfarius, head of the Hydra novel, the Primarch Alfarius suspects that Layman Russ, the Emperor's self-appointed executioner, was responsible for at least one of the disappearances. Russ himself seems to confirm this indirectly when he tells Magnus during the Council of Nicaea that he does not wish to lose a third brother. He has already lost two. He does not want to lose another. The surviving Space Marines of the Lost Legions were not all destroyed. There is strong evidence, supported by multiple sources, that they were mind-wiped and quietly absorbed into other legions, primarily the Ultramarines. This explains the sudden and suspicious swell in Ultramarine numbers that occurred around the same time period. Archmago's Belisarius call, 10,000 years later, confirmed this indirectly when he requested permission from the resurrected Guilliman to use the gene seed stocks of the 2nd and 11th Legions to create new Primaris Space Marine chapters. The gene seed still existed. It had been preserved. Guilliman refused the request with barely contained fury, but Call made a point that cuts to the heart of the mystery. The warriors were not at fault, Call said. The science was not at fault. Their Primarchs were. This is perhaps the most important piece of evidence we have. Whatever happened, it was the Primarchs themselves who were responsible. Not their legions, not their warriors, not their worlds. The Gene Fathers did something, or became something so terrible, that the Emperor decided it was better for the entire Imperium to forget they had ever existed. And there is one more detail that haunts the imagination. The Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guardians who watch over the darkest secrets of the Imperial Palace, are confirmed to keep something called Subject 11 in the dark cells, the deepest and most forbidden vaults beneath the palace on Terra. Is that the 11th Primarch, sealed away in some kind of stasis or imprisonment for over 10,000 years? Or is it something else entirely? Something that grew from whatever catastrophe befell the 11th Legion? We do not know. The Emperor buried this secret deeper than any other secret in the history of his Imperium. He mind-wiped his own sons to ensure they could not remember. He destroyed records on a scale that has never been matched before or since. And he clearly intends for it to stay buried forever. Number 5. The Golden Throne is failing, and the Mechanicus cannot repair it. The Golden Throne is the single most important piece of technology in the Imperium of Man. Without it, there is no Imperium. Without it, there is no Astronomicon to guide ships through the warp. Without it, there is no seal holding back the demonic tide that threatens to pour through the breach in the webway and consume Holy Terra itself. Without it, the Emperor dies, and it is falling apart. The throne is a relic from the dark age of technology, an era of human achievement so far beyond the current capabilities of the Imperium that most of the Mechanicus treats its remaining artifacts as sacred relics rather than comprehensible machines. The Emperor found it and repurposed it for his webway project, modifying it with his own unique psychic engineering and possibly with Xeno's technology that no one else in the Imperium has ever understood. The tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus who maintain the Golden Throne do so through ritual and repetition rather than genuine comprehension. They follow maintenance routines that have been passed down for 10,000 years, copied and recopied by generation after generation of magi who understand the steps but not the reasons behind them. They can replace components they recognize. They can perform repairs that their predecessors documented, but they cannot fix the fundamental systems that are degrading. Each year, more components fail. Each year, the throne demands more psychers to maintain the same output. What once required hundreds of sacrificed souls per day now demands roughly 1,000. The choir of the Adeptus Astronomica burns through psychers at an ever-increasing rate. Each one consumed utterly, their life force fed into the machine to sustain what little remains of the Emperor's tortured existence. By early in the 41st millennium, 4 times the number of psychers were required compared to the original levels. And in the final year of that millennium, tech priests discovered failures in the throne's mechanisms that were completely and utterly beyond their ability to repair. They did not just lack the parts. They did not just lack the expertise. They lacked the fundamental understanding of what the failed systems even did. The mechanisms of the Golden Throne have spread out like roots throughout the entire inner palace over the millennia, worming down into forgotten crypts and climbing up into the highest peaks of the Himalayan complex. Its power coils are the size of cities. Its foundations are the remade mountains themselves. The Mechanicus has added so many layers of additional machinery over its 10,000 years of continuous operation that the planet around it has been utterly reshaped. The throne is no longer a single device sitting in a single room. It is a continent-spanning network of interlocked systems so vast and so complex that no single mind, human or machine, can comprehend the whole of it. The Mechanicus tried to find solutions. They reached out to the most brilliant minds available. They even, in an act of desperation that would be considered the most extreme heresy by most of the Imperium, struck a deal with the Dark Eldar. The Drukhari, the twisted inhabitants of the dark city of Komorag, are masters of keeping bodies alive long past the point of natural death. Their homunculi covens have perfected the art of resurrection and biological preservation over millions of years of sadistic experimentation. If anyone in the galaxy could help repair or sustain the Golden Throne, it would be them. But the deal went wrong. The key figures involved, a fabricator general of Mars, a custodian tribune, and the Drukhari experts they had been working with, all ended up dead. Every last one of them. Someone or something did not want the throne to be repaired. Whether this was the work of chaos agents, political rivals within the Imperium, or some other force entirely remains unknown. The Primarch Vulcan of the Salamanders built a failsafe into the throne. During the Siege of Terra, a dead man's switch that would activate if the throne ever failed completely. According to what little is known about this device, it would destroy Terra itself and strike a blow against chaos so devastating that the dark gods would never recover from it. The Emperor's last resort, in other words, is to take everyone and everything with him when he goes. Archmagos Belisarius Call has hinted that he might possess the knowledge to repair or even replace the Golden Throne, but the political and religious implications of tampering with the God Emperor's resting place have created an impenetrable wall of resistance. The Ecclesiarchy would consider it blasphemy. The more conservative factions of the Mechanicus would consider it tech heresy of the highest order. The Custodian Guard would need to be convinced that the risk was worth taking. And even Guilliman, the Lord Regent of the Imperium, has not yet been willing to force the issue. So the clock ticks, the systems degrade, the psychers burn, and the most important machine in the galaxy slowly, inevitably falls apart. Number 6. He imprisoned the Void Dragon on Mars to subconsciously steer humanity's technological development. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in the most forbidden tunnels of the Noctis Labyrinthus, past security measures so ancient and so powerful that even the Fabricator General does not have clearance to pass them, there is something sleeping. It is older than the Imperium by countless millennia. It is older than humanity's interstellar civilization. It may be older than the human species itself. And the Emperor put it there deliberately. The creature is called the Dragon of Mars, and the evidence points overwhelmingly to it being a shard of Magladroth, the Void Dragon, the Catan, a star god, one of the most ancient and powerful entities in the entire Milky Way galaxy. The Catan were beings of pure energy who existed in the spaces between stars in the earliest ages of the universe. They fed on solar radiation and were, for all practical purposes, gods in the most literal meaning of the word. When the Necromtyre, the mortal race that would become the Necrons, offered them physical bodies made of living metal called necrodermis, the Catan used their new forms to wage a war of extermination against the old ones that reshaped the galaxy itself. The Void Dragon was special even among the Catan. It was the master of the material universe. It had absolute dominion over technology, matter, and energy in a way that even the other star gods could not match. Its warriors were practically invincible. It could create and manipulate machines on a scale that defied mortal comprehension. When the Necrons eventually turned against their Satan masters and shattered them into fragments, the Void Dragon was broken into shards and imprisoned, but at least one of those shards ended up on Terra in the ancient past, during the Roman Empire. According to the memories preserved by the Guardians of the Dragon, the Emperor, operating under one of his many historical identities, fought the shard near the city of Cyrene in Libya. It appeared as a great dragon with silver scales harder than steel that rippled like liquid mercury when struck, its breast shining with the light of the stars it had consumed. The Emperor fought it. He could not destroy it, but he was able to subdue it, using his unmatched psychic might, binding it in chains of psychic energy that the Catan shard had no defense against. And then he transported it to Mars and locked it away in the Noctis Labyrinthus. Why Mars? Because Mars was the center of human technological development. It was where the cult of the machine had taken root, where the tech priests who would eventually become the Adeptus Mechanicus were building their power and their knowledge base. And the Emperor knew that the sleeping dragon's presence would influence them. According to Adept Semyon, one of the Guardians of the Dragon, the Emperor deliberately orchestrated the rise of the Mechanicum by placing the dragon on Mars. The sleeping Tan shard emanated dreams, unconscious pulses of its nature as the master of technology in the material universe seeped into the minds of the Martian colonists and drove them toward ever greater feats of mechanical innovation. The machine god that the cult of the machine worships, the omnisire that every tech priest devotes their life to, may not be the Emperor at all. It may be the Void Dragon, dreaming in its prison beneath the red surface of Mars, whispering into the minds of the faithful without any of them ever knowing the truth. The Eternity Gate in the Imperial Palace on Terra features a prominent image of the Emperor battling a dragon. No one in the 41st millennium knows what this represents, but we do. When the Horus heresy broke out and the schism of Mars split the Mechanicum in two, the master adepts who sided with Horus knew about the dragon. They tried to reach it. They tried to wake it up. Dahlia Cythera, a seemingly ordinary Terran girl chosen by the Emperor for reasons she did not initially understand, was transformed into a perpetual and installed as the new guardian of the dragon. She and the Skitari protector Romu 31 have been keeping watch over the sleeping shard for 10,000 years, maintaining its bonds, ensuring it stays dormant. In 1988 of the 41st millennium, a Necron fleet attacked Mars. 5 Shroud-class light cruisers suicide rushed through the entire Sol system defense grid to reach the Red Planet. Their purpose was never confirmed, but the implication is overwhelming. They were checking on their property, making sure the shard was still there. The Adeptus Mechanicus is the most powerful technological institution in the Imperium. Its tech priests maintain the war machines, the starships, the weapons, and the infrastructure that keep the Imperium functioning. Without the Mechanicus, the Imperium would collapse within a generation, and the entire foundation of their religion, the spiritual core of everything they believe and everything they do, may be built on the subconscious influence of an alien god that the Emperor imprisoned beneath their feet as a way of tricking them into building his war machines for him. Number 7. The Webway project would have made the Astronomicon obsolete. Magnus ruined it permanently. After the great Imperial victory during the Ulunor Crusade against the largest Orc empire in the galaxy, the Emperor did something that stunned and confused his sons. He named Horus as War Master giving him supreme command of all Imperial military forces. And then he left. He went back to Terra and disappeared into the Imperial dungeon beneath the palace, telling no one except Malcador what he was doing or why. This decision was catastrophic for the morale of the Great Crusade. Horus, who had fought by his father's side for over 30 years, who had saved the Emperor's life on Ullanor, who had just been given the greatest honor any being in the Imperium could receive, felt abandoned. The other Primarchs felt abandoned. The entire military structure of the Imperium was left confused and resentful, wondering why the master of mankind would walk away from his life's work at the very moment it was approaching completion. The Emperor was building a human extension of the Eldar webway. This was the reason for everything. The webway is an ancient network of tunnels and passages that exists in a dimension between real space and the warp. Created by the Old Ones millions of years ago and expanded and maintained by the Eldar for millennia afterward, the webway allowed safe, fast, reliable travel between distant points in the galaxy without ever entering the warp. No daemons, no warp storms, no risk of mutation or madness or temporal displacement. No psychers needed to navigate. No astronomicon needed to provide a reference point. If the Emperor could connect human worlds through the webway, it would render every aspect of warp travel obsolete overnight. The navigators, the powerful mutant families who had held a monopoly on warp travel for millennia and who wielded enormous political influence because of it, would become irrelevant. The astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse that the Emperor projected across the galaxy at such enormous personal cost, would no longer be necessary. Astropaths, the psychic communicators who served as the Imperium's only means of faster-than-light messaging, could be replaced by simple communication relays running through webway conduits. But the webway project was about far more than just better transportation. The Emperor's ultimate goal was to completely sever humanity from the warp, to cut the species off from the Imperium entirely, to deprive the Chaos Gods of their richest source of food and energy, and then, protected within the safety of the webway's sealed corridors, to guide humanity through its inevitable evolution into a fully psychic race. This was the endgame, the final step, the capstone of a plan that had been in motion for tens of thousands of years. Humanity would evolve. It would become something greater than it had ever been, and it would do so safely, shielded from the predations of chaos by the ancient and indestructible walls of the webway. The Golden Throne was the key to all of this. It was originally designed not as a life support device, but as a webway gate controller, a mechanism that could open, maintain, and stabilize a portal into the webway from beneath the Imperial Palace, powered by a psyker of extraordinary ability. The Emperor powered it initially, his own unmatched psychic might holding the gate open, while thousands of Mechanicus workers labored to construct the human extensions of the webway network. But the plan called for someone else to eventually take his place on the throne. Someone powerful enough to maintain the gate, but who would not be needed for the endless tasks of running the Imperium. Many believe, and the lore strongly implies, that this person was supposed to be Magnus the Red. Magnus was the most psychically gifted of all the Primarchs. His power was second only to the Emperor's own. He had been created with a specific purpose in mind, and that purpose was almost certainly to sit on the Golden Throne and serve as the permanent psychic battery that kept the webway gate open. The Emperor even offered Magnus this role directly, telling the Crimson King that it would be a great honor and that his spirit would be free to travel anywhere in the galaxy while his body remained on the throne. But Magnus refused. The Emperor had also told him that the 1,000 sons were genetically flawed, that the flesh-change mutations that plagued the Legion were incurable, and that the Legion might need to be culled. Magnus would never abandon his sons. And then Magnus destroyed everything. When the Crimson King foresaw the Horus heresy through his formidable psychic abilities, he saw the fall of the War Master, the corruption of the legions, the coming civil war that would tear the Imperium apart. He knew he needed to warn his father immediately, but instead of sending an astropathic message, instead of dispatching a courier ship, instead of using any of the conventional methods of communication that, while slow, would have gotten the job done without catastrophic side effects, Magnus chose the worst possible approach. He used a forbidden psychic ritual of staggering power to project his consciousness directly through the warp and into the Emperor's throne room on Terra. The ritual was immensely difficult. The psychic wards that the Emperor and Malcador had spent years carefully constructing around the Imperial Palace and the Webway Gate were specifically designed to be impenetrable. But an anonymous entity within the warp, almost certainly the chaos god Saench, the architect of fate, whispered to Magnus and offered him the additional power he needed to break through. Magnus, desperate and panicking, accepted. His astral form punched through the wards like a battering ram through stained glass. The psychic protections around the Webway Gate shattered. The carefully maintained barrier between the human, constructed extensions of the Webway and the roiling madness of the warp was torn open, and through the breach poured an endless, screaming tide of demons. Tens of thousands of Mechanicus adepts who had been laboring on the construction of the human Webway sections were slaughtered in moments. The Legio Custodes and the Sisters of Silence were thrown into a desperate 5-year war within the Webway itself, fighting to prevent the demonic hordes from pouring through the gate and onto the surface of Terra. The Custodians lost 90% of their strength. The Sisters of Silence suffered nearly as badly, and the Emperor himself was forced to sit on the Golden Throne and use his own psychic power to hold the gate shut. He could never leave again. The Webway project was dead. Humanity's best hope for a future free from the warp, free from chaos, free from the endless cycle of suffering and corruption that had plagued the species since the Age of Strife, was gone forever, destroyed in a single moment of well-intentioned arrogance by the one son who loved knowledge more than any other. The Golden Throne, which was supposed to be a doorway to paradise, became a prison. The Emperor has been chained to it for 10,000 years, slowly dying, holding back the tide of demons with nothing but the fading remnants of his will. And the chaos god Saench, who had orchestrated the entire sequence of events from beginning to end, who had whispered the offer of power to Magnus at precisely the right moment, who had manipulated the Primarch's love for his father into the weapon that destroyed his father's greatest work, laughed, because that is what Saint Ench does. He plans, and his plans always come together. Number 8. The Sensei. His biological mortal children, hunted and killed by the Inquisition. The Emperor lived for tens of thousands of years before the founding of the Imperium. He walked among ordinary humans under countless different identities. He was a soldier, a philosopher, a king, a beggar, a scientist, a prophet. He lived entire lifetimes, grew old in the eyes of those around him, and then disappeared, only to reappear somewhere else, in some other form, under some other name. And during those many, many lifetimes, he was still, in the most fundamental biological sense, a man. He took partners, he had relationships, he started families, he had children. Not the Primarchs, not genetically engineered demigods grown in tanks and infused with stolen warp energy. Real, biological, naturally conceived children, born the way every other human child has ever been born. And some of those children, and some of their descendants, inherited a fraction of their father's extraordinary nature. These descendants are called the Sensei. The lore on the Sensei comes primarily from the earliest editions of Warhammer 40,000, particularly the Realm of Chaos books, and their current canonical status is somewhat ambiguous. Games Workshop has suggested that the Sensei might be a manipulation of the chaos god Saench rather than a genuine phenomenon, but the original lore is detailed, internally consistent, and has been referenced and echoed in various forms throughout the history of the setting, including the concept of the perpetuals that appeared in the Horus Heresy novels. So let us discuss what the lore tells us. The Sensei are immortal, or at the very least, extraordinarily long-lived. They are sterile, unable to have children of their own, and they have a unique relationship with the warp that is the opposite of their father's nature. The Emperor was one of the most powerful psychers in history. The Sensei are psychic blanks. They cannot be detected by psychic means. They are invisible to other psychers, invisible to daemons, and invisible to the warp itself. This means that the Emperor, despite his vast psychic powers, cannot sense them. He does not know they exist. His own biological children are hidden from him by the very nature he passed down to them. The Sensei have adapted to living in hiding among ordinary humanity over the millennia. They tend to become wanderers, heroes, champions of justice. They fight against oppression, wherever they find it, whether that oppression comes from chaos or from the tyranny of the Imperium itself. They form small bands of adventurers, sometimes including Xenos and Abumans, and they are spoken of in folk tales and legends across hundreds of worlds. The Captain Eternal, the Wandering Inquisitor, stories that no one takes seriously but that keep appearing century after century on world after world. And the Inquisition hunts them. To the Inquisition, the sensei are dangerous mutants, immortal beings with strange powers who consort with rebels, aliens, and other undesirables. They are classified as heretics, branded as enemies of the Imperium, and eliminated whenever they are found. The Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition even established a specific program called the Eternity Project, whose sole purpose was to hunt down and destroy these immortal beings. There is a secret organization called the Illuminati that knows the truth about the sensei. The Illuminati are individuals, many of them inquisitors themselves, who have survived demonic possession and cast the demon out of their own bodies. This experience gives them a unique understanding of the warp and immunity to its corrupting influence. The Illuminati have learned from the Eldar's Black Library about the Star Child, a fragment of the Emperor's soul that was cast into the warp when he was struck down by Horus, and about the role the sensei could play in the Emperor's eventual rebirth. Their plan is to gather as many sensei as possible, protect them from the Inquisition, and at the right moment, when the Emperor's physical form finally gives out and the Golden Throne fails, sacrifice the sensei to provide the psychic energy needed to awaken the Star Child and allow the Emperor to be reborn. But the Inquisition keeps killing them. The very institution that exists to protect the Imperium is systematically hunting down and destroying the Emperor's true biological offspring, the only beings in the galaxy who might hold the key to his resurrection and the salvation of the entire human species. Whether this is simple ignorance, deliberate malice, or another manipulation by the ever-scheming Taench, the result is the same. The Emperor's real children are dying, and with them, perhaps humanity's last hope. Number 9. He may have caused the Age of Strife through early psychic experiments. The Age of Strife was the darkest chapter in human history. For nearly 5,000 years, from roughly the 25th millennium to the 30th, human civilization disintegrated. The golden age of the dark age of technology, an era when humanity commanded technology so advanced that it makes the modern Imperium look like a society of cave dwellers, collapsed into absolute ruin. Warp storms of unprecedented ferocity severed interstellar travel and communication. Psychers emerged uncontrollably across the human population, their powers becoming doorways through which demonic entities invaded real space. Artificial intelligences, the Men of Iron, rose up against their human creators in a war that killed billions. Alien races that had been allies and trading partners turned on their weakened human neighbors and slaughtered or enslaved them. Whole star systems were scoured of life. Terra itself devolved into a hellscape of warring techno-barbarian states that fought over the scraps of their former greatness for thousands of years, and the Emperor was there through all of it. Now, the Age of Strife had many causes. The emergence of psychers was a natural evolutionary development. The warp storms were caused in part by the growing depravity of the Eldar civilization, whose hedonistic excesses were building toward the birth of Slanesh. The rebellion of the Men of Iron was a separate catastrophe that may have had nothing to do with the warp at all. But the Emperor was not a passive observer during this period. He was the first and most powerful human psyker ever born. He had been alive for over 30,000 years by the time the Age of Strife began. He had spent those millennia secretly guiding human civilization, manipulating events from the shadows, using his psychic powers to influence the course of history. He had traveled to Molech and bargained with the Chaos Gods. He had been conducting experiments with the warp for longer than most human civilizations had existed, and some theories suggested the Emperor's own activities may have contributed to the catastrophe. Consider this. The Emperor was the new man, a being of unprecedented psychic power, born from the collective souls of thousands of ancient shamans who sacrificed themselves to create him. His very existence was a psychic event of enormous magnitude, a beacon in the warp that drew the attention of every entity in the Imperium. Throughout human history, he had been experimenting with psychic phenomena, probing the nature of the warp, developing his abilities, and subtly manipulating the psychic development of the human species. Is it possible that this constant psychic activity, conducted over tens of thousands of years by the most powerful mind in the galaxy, contributed to the destabilization of the warp that triggered the Age of Strife? Is it possible that the Emperor's experiments accelerated the emergence of uncontrolled psychers in the human population, creating the very crisis that he would later use to justify his seizure of power? We know the Emperor was already conducting genetic experiments during the Age of Strife itself. He was building the Thunder Warriors in his laboratories beneath the Himalayas. He was preparing for the Unification Wars. He was using the period of darkness and suffering as an opportunity to consolidate his own power on Terra while the rest of humanity burned. He did not cause the Age of Strife through deliberate malice, but the possibility that his experiments and his very existence as the most powerful psyker in the galaxy contributed to the catastrophe is deeply troubling. And when the Age of Strife finally ended, when the warp storms calmed after the birth of Slaanesh, it was the Emperor who emerged from the ruins with an army of genetically enhanced super soldiers and declared himself the ruler of all mankind. The greatest beneficiary of humanity's darkest hour was the man whose actions may have helped bring it about. Number 10. He considered the Primarchs as creations, not sons, and they all knew it on some level. This is the last secret, and it is the one that hurts the most, not because it is the most shocking, or the most dramatic, or the most galaxy-shaking in its implications, but because it is the most human, the most personal, the most painfully relatable, even for people who have never picked up a bolter or set foot on a battlefield. The Primarchs called the Emperor their father, every single one of them. The loyalists and the traitors alike. They fought for him. They built empires in his name. They spent their entire lives trying to earn his approval, his affection, his love. Even the ones who turned against him, even Horus and Lorga and Magnus and Angron and Mortarion and Perturbo and Cursey and Fulgrim, they loved him once. They loved him desperately and completely in the way that all children love their parents, with that primal need for acknowledgement and acceptance that nothing else can satisfy. They wanted him to be proud of them. They wanted him to see them. They wanted him to call them his sons and mean it, and he never did. When Robout Guilliman was resurrected in the 41st millennium by the combined efforts of Archmagos Call and the Eldar god Yanid, he traveled to Terra and stood before the Golden Throne for the first time in 10,000 years. He spoke with the Emperor, or rather, the Emperor communicated with him through fragmented psychic impressions, broken images, and raw emotional transmissions that were barely comprehensible even to a being as brilliant as Guilliman. And what Guilliman took away from that encounter was a devastating, soul-crushing realization. The Emperor did not see the Primarchs as children. He had never seen them as children. Not once, not for a single moment in the entire history of the Great Crusade, or the Horus Heresy, or the 10 millennia since. They were his creations, his instruments, his means to an end, named, numbered, and designed for specific purposes, like pieces on a regicide board. Valuable, certainly, irreplaceable in some cases, but no more his sons than a lasgun is the son of the factory that produced it. This should not have been a surprise. The evidence had been there from the very beginning, written into every interaction the Emperor ever had with his so-called children. Look at how he treated Angron. The Primarch of the World Eaters was a man who had been enslaved from infancy, tortured for years, had crude lobotomy devices called the butcher's nails, hammered into his brain to amplify his aggression until he could think of nothing but killing, and who had finally broken free and led a slave revolt with the only people who had ever shown him kindness, his fellow gladiators on the world of Nuceria. When the Emperor found Angron, the Primarch was about to die. He was surrounded by enemies, outnumbered and outgunned, making his final stand with the remnants of his gladiator family at his side. It should have been a moment of salvation. The Emperor had found his lost son and had the power to save everyone. Instead, he teleported Angron away and left every last one of his gladiator brothers and sisters to die. When Angron screamed and raged and asked why, the Emperor said he had his sights on bigger things. When Angron told his father that only a ghost remained, that the man he could have been had died on Nuceria, The emperor said that a ghost would suffice. That is not how a father speaks to a son. That is how an engineer speaks about a malfunctioning machine that still has some functional components. Look at how he handled Conrad Kurz. The Night Haunter was clearly mentally ill. He suffered from psychic visions of the future that tormented him with images of darkness, suffering, and his own inevitable death. These visions caused seizures, paranoia, and increasingly erratic and violent behavior. The Emperor knew about this. He had the most advanced psychic and genetic knowledge in the galaxy. He could have tried to help. He could have attempted to ease the visions or treat the underlying condition. He did nothing because Kurz was still useful as a terror weapon. His suffering was acceptable as long as it produced results. Look at Lorgar. Instead of trusting his son with the truth about the Chaos Gods and explaining why religion was genuinely dangerous, the Emperor destroyed his city, publicly humiliated him, and told him to stop asking questions. Look at Perturabo, who was given the most grueling and thankless assignments in the entire Great Crusade and never received a single word of recognition, while his brother Dawn was showered with honors for similar work. Look at Mortarion, whose final battle against his alien father on Barbarous was stolen from him by the Emperor, who showed up at the last moment, saved him, and then demanded his loyalty as payment for a rescue that Mortarion had never asked for. Every single Primarch, in their own way, felt the distance between themselves and the Emperor. The Loyalists felt it and buried it deep, channeling their need for approval into ever greater acts of devotion and service. Dawn built the defenses of terror because that was the only language of love the Emperor seemed to understand. Gilliman wrote the Codex Astartes because organizing and improving things was the closest he could come to earning his father's attention. Vulcan was kind because kindness was what the Emperor had programmed him to express, and he clung to it as proof that he was more than just a weapon. The traitors felt it too, but they could not contain it. Horus felt it when he realized that the Emperor had been keeping the greatest secrets of the universe from him, while asking him to fight and die in ignorance. Magnus felt it when the Emperor condemned his legion for a genetic flaw that the Emperor himself had designed into their gene seed. Perturabo felt it every single time his iron warriors were thrown into another meat grinder, while the Imperial fists received the glory. And Lorgar felt it most keenly of all, when the being he worshipped as a god looked at him with contempt and told him that his love was unwanted. The cruelest part of all of this is that the Emperor may not have been wrong to think the way he did. He was fighting a war against literal gods. He was trying to save an entire species from extinction at the hands of entities that could corrupt the strongest mind in the galaxy. With a whisper, he could not afford to be a father. He did not have the luxury of sentimentality or emotional attachment. He needed soldiers. He needed generals. He needed weapons. And that is what he built. But the Primarchs were too human, too full of the emotions and needs and vulnerabilities that the Emperor had woven into their very design, to accept being used as tools without love. They wanted a father. They needed a father. And they got a general who saw them as equipment. When the truth became too painful to bear, when the gap between what they needed and what they received became too wide to bridge, half of them chose to burn the galaxy rather than live with it. That is the real tragedy of the Horus heresy. Not that chaos corrupted the Emperor's sons. Chaos was just the match. The kindling had been stacked for decades. The real tragedy is that the Emperor never gave the Primarchs a reason not to be corrupted. He never loved them. And on some level, in some quiet, private, shameful corner of their superhuman hearts, they all knew. So there you have it. 10 secrets that the master of mankind would rather stay buried beneath 10,000 years of propaganda, censorship, and enforced ignorance. He made deals with the very gods he told his people did not exist. He built his entire empire on a lie so vast that when it collapsed, it took half the galaxy with it. He created an army of superhuman warriors with the full intention of throwing them away when he was done with them. Exactly the way he had already thrown away the Thunder Warriors before them. He erased 2 of his own sons from history so completely that even the traitors who sold their souls to chaos will not speak their names. He is slowly dying on a machine that no one understands and no one can fix, and the entire Imperium is too paralyzed by fear and superstition to do anything about it. He chained an alien god beneath Mars and used its sleeping dreams to trick an entire civilization of tech priests into building his war machines. He had a plan that would have freed humanity from the warp forever, and it was destroyed by the one son who loved him the most and wanted nothing more than to help him. He had real, biological children scattered across the galaxy, and the Inquisition is hunting them down and killing them like vermin. He may have contributed to the worst catastrophe in human history through his own experiments and his own arrogance. And he never, not once in his entire tens of thousands of years of existence, saw the 20 demigods he created as anything more than useful instruments to be deployed, exploited, and discarded as circumstances demanded. The Emperor of mankind is not a god. He is not a savior. He is not even, by any reasonable standard of moral judgment, a good person. He is the most powerful, most brilliant, most ruthless, and most fundamentally dishonest being that humanity has ever produced. And everything he built, every institution, every tradition, every prayer whispered by a frightened soldier on a dying world, every hymn sung in every cathedral, on every one of a million planets, is rooted in lies, secrets, manipulation, and the cold calculation of a man who would sacrifice anything and anyone, including his own children, to achieve his vision for the species. The Imperium survives because of him, and the Imperium suffers because of him. Both of those statements are true, and neither one cancels the other out. He saved humanity from extinction, and he condemned it to 10,000 years of unimaginable horror. He built the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known, and he ensured that it would be rotten at its core from the very first day of its existence. That is the truth the Emperor does not want you to know, and now you know it. So keep your head down, watch your back, burn this document after reading it, and for the love of whatever you choose to believe in, do not repeat any of this where an inquisitor might hear you, because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and the most dangerous weapon in that war has always been, and will always be, the truth.